Hello and welcome to another video with me and Alan Ogden. We're here to inform and educate you on health issues and possible solutions. We're not here to treat, diagnose, cure, or prescribe anything. For those concerns, it's best to consult your family physician. Now, about my good friend Alan. Alan is a pharmacist, nutritionist, researcher, and genetic consultant. Alan studied at the University of Alberta, University of Denver, IHI Phoenix, Alive Academy Vancouver, and the Research Institute of the McGill University. If you want to know more about what's being talked about in these videos, please get back to the person who shared them with you.
Hey, good
So,
evening.
Alan,
Great to see you.
Good evening. Anyways, I guess we got an interesting discussions tonight. And the first thing I'd like to discuss is what does inflammation have to do with our health?
Wow, that's a great topic. In 2004, Time Magazine, their cover story article, big cover of Time Magazine, inflammation, the root cause of all disease. And so that's fine, but where does that inflammation come from and what do we do to control it? So they actually repeated that again. I think they reran that around 2012. They rewrote the story and did another cover story article on inflammation. And I would say it's generally accepted in the medical community of all kinds, whether it's natural medicine or traditional allopathic medicine, that if you have a disease of some sort, there's a component of inflammation that goes along with that. So just to differentiate, if we get a cough or cold or flu that's bacterial, we'll get a fever. That fever is a response. It's a type of inflammatory response to say to us, you've got something going on that you need to take care of. So while that's not the same type of an inflammatory response as, say, when we have chronic ailment, where we're in constant pain or constant discomfort, or if we have cardiovascular disease, which can come with no discomfort, or we could have cancer for a period of time without any discomfort, underlying that is inflammation as well. And that inflammatory response can be completely different. It's called subclinical inflammation. So our body doesn't make us immediately aware of that going on. And that's really what the Time Magazine article was trying to expose, is we could have this subclinical inflammation going on at any time in our body. And, it's kind of the silent killer. It will show up if we go to the doctor and we have blood tests. There are markers of inflammation that we can test for now. C-reactive protein being the most standardized marker of total body inflammation. Homocysteine is another marker. Homocysteine really tells us how well we're utilizing our B vitamins, and B vitamins are extremely important in the reduction of inflammation. They're also in detoxification, getting rid of things out of our body. So if we're not using our B vitamins very well, homocysteine can build up. Other markers of inflammation are triglycerides, maybe even our lipid profile to a lesser extent. And it needs to look at cholesterol and be very concerned about high LDL levels. But now that we can look deeper, because we have the technology and science to do it, there are other markers of inflammation that become more important for us to monitor. And we can start that at any time. We don't have to be sick to do that. We can go actually have sort of maybe a baseline, you could call it, test done, get our markers, and then work from there. And every year or biannually if you're younger, but at my age, I have an annual physical. We check all these markers. We can track the progress or how well I'm handling it over the years. So we're not surprised by inflammation, a subclinical inflammation that can develop into a disease.
Okay, so how does detoxification play in all of this?
Well, there's a main molecule in our body called glutathione. And glutathione is the mother of all of our body's responses to inflammation, detoxification, and other things that we can talk about. So where do we get this molecule? When glutathione was discovered back in 1888, the person who discovered it, I wrote a big article on it, and was all excited about it because it's called coincident with life. In other words, we can't have life without this molecule. And the reason for that is multiple. We'll talk about those reasons. Inflammation, the control of inflammation being one of them, control of detoxification. We'll talk about some other ones. But where did we get glutathione? How can we, where do we get our immune system, I guess, is a better response, because our inflammation is about our immune system and its response to different things in our body. So where does that come from? And, we hate to blame the moms, but we do get our immune system. So we get from our mom in the womb, we get a certain portion of our immune system. So depending on how healthy our mom is, that can determine ultimately the health of our immune system. Although babies or a womb will tend to get all it needs, and the mother then is the one suffers. So, you hear about ladies that are diabetic during pregnancy, but they're not diabetic at other times. And that's because the baby's drawing down on them and on their immune system. So the baby's getting everything it needs, and the mother is the one who's having the symptomology of some disease. So we're born with our glutathione. We don't get glutathione from anywhere else. We get it when we're born. And for many, many years, the medical sort of philosophy about glutathione is you got what you got, and there's nothing you can do about what you got. We now know that that's not true. So we have this molecule, and it's a very, very integral molecule to our life. And because of that, we did get what we got, but we can recycle what we got. And so whatever it is that we got, we can maximize the effectiveness and the efficiency of the utilization of that molecule. So our body's first response is inflammation, and glutathione is the first responder to inflammation. And basically, if I can sort of describe it this way, when there's an inflammatory response in our body, there's a difference between the surface tension of different molecules. And I'm just trying to keep this simple. So let's say a bacteria comes into your body, that bacteria has a certain electrical frequency which our body can detect, and it's not normal. It's not a normal frequency that our body would normally accommodate. So then that triggers a response. We call it immune response in our body, but it's actually to this differential of surface tensions or variability of electrical pulse in these molecules that triggers our immune system to go, that's inflammatory, and we need to trigger what's called a nerve to a genetic reaction that says we're going to put this fire out. We're going to take care of this inflammation. So think of inflammation as being like a forest fire, or it could be a grass fire. So it could be something that burns underneath, like, grass fires, they burn underneath for a long time, and then all of a sudden they come up somewhere and you've got a disaster. So our body can detect that, and it will fight that. If we do have a big like a sudden inflammatory response due to something we're exposed to, then it's like a forest fire, and our immune system will throw everything at it to fight that inflammation, to fight the differential between the frequencies, and try to get rid of those, neutralize those molecules through a redox potential. And that's what glutathione is really good at. So glutathione can carry different molecules, and it can neutralize these molecules that are in our body that either show up as inflammation or they show up as a toxin. So let's say we get gasoline in our body. How does our body know that gasoline or some other toxin is in our body? Well, there's this differential in the frequency of those molecules in our body. Our body doesn't recognize that and says, okay, we need to neutralize that. And depending on where that goes, so things like toxins, for instance, heavy metals and so on, they're easily absorbed by the fat in our body. And no matter how thin we are, We can have, great control of our weight. We still have fat in our skin. We have fat around our organs that's there on purpose. It's going to stay there. We have the number of fat molecules in our body doesn't change over time. It's literally the size of the fat molecule. So somebody who's 100 pounds overweight, they have their fat molecules have become huge, overburdened molecule or cells. And then when they lose the weight, those fat cells shrink. But we don't really lose a lot of fat cells when we're managing our weight. So there's this differential that happens between cells, and our body can recognize that differential, that electron potential between cells, and go, oh, we got to take care of that. Now, if that goes into our fat, so like toxin, we're talking about detoxification. If it goes into a fat, it's kind of protected. So our body has to be really smart about how it does this. And it knows that it's there. And glutathione, this is an amazing thing about this glutathione, this molecule that handles inflammation. It can actually, it's what's called an aqualipid. It can penetrate anywhere in our body, whether it's water or fat. It can penetrate, and it can liquefy those molecules, because even in that fat, there's going to be a level of inflammation. That molecule doesn't belong there. So our body is on a really microscopic level. There's a response to that, and it's like a little fire, and our body is responding to that. It'll send glutathione in there, and glutathione will actually neutralize that. It can aquify like zinc or mercury or something we've been exposed to, gasoline, diesel fuel, and it can liquefy that and get it out of our body. So it really has it has these magical properties, if you will. The first one being to inflammation, just general inflammation. And our body goes through cycles of inflammation throughout the day. Like if we're out in the sunshine for long periods of time, we don't realize it, but our skin is, we're having an inflammatory response in our skin. We can come home, we're sunburnt, we know we've had too much sun exposure, but if we don't burn easily, we're still having an inflammatory response to the level of radiation from the sun, and that is causing an inflammatory response. So we actually store glutathione in our skin to neutralize that response, and hopefully we don't burn as much as we would without glutathione. It's the same when we're exposed to toxins. We have glutathione in our skin, in our lungs, in our nasal passages. We have it in different parts of our body. So hopefully, we're protected from these external toxins. It's also, there's a lot of talk right now about like 5G and all these types of frequencies, and why they're disruptive in our body is because they can penetrate. They can disrupt this frequency, our normal body frequency. So we call that homeostasis. So we all have our own frequency, which is just our frequency. Like your frequency, my frequency are different. We have our own frequency because we have our own protein composition in our body, which makes us us, and somebody else. And if we mess with that, so something like 5G or these EMFs that people are talking about, electromagnetic frequencies, what they can do is they can actually confuse our own body frequency. And glutathione is a great protector of that, because just go back to what I said about inflammation or toxins. It's the differential in frequency that your body's recognizing as being something that you need to take care of. And so when we're exposed to a lot of 5G, we really need to optimize our glutathione and other molecules that we can talk about as we go along. So inflammation it is called the silent killer for a reason, because we can have inflammation going on in our body and not have anything show up until we, have a cardiovascular accident or we have an outbreak of something. And if we just optimize our glutathione, hopefully we can put off some of those types of things. Also, we're toxins, these things that we're exposed to all the time. We go different places, we're around people. During the pandemic, one of the things that nobody talked about is the fact that pre-pandemic, we were exposed to 30 to 50,000 viruses a day, and nothing happened to us. Like our body handled that, and all of a sudden there's this one virus that came along that was, supposedly so potent it could, kill you, And actually, what's really interesting about the COVID type of viruses, they've been around for 25 years. It's not like it was a new thing. SARS-CoV virus has been around for 25 years. And we'd already built immunity to a lot of these. Now, how do we build immunity? Our body creates a substance which we call an antibody, and that antibody is got the electrical potential to neutralize that thing that comes into our body. So we had some built-in immunity already to what was happening, but that wasn't talked about very much. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit more now, but we didn't talk about that much. Actually, in March of 2020, there was a posting put out by our public health here in British Columbia, telling everybody they should immediately modulate or find something to optimize their glutathione. That would be the best way to protect yourself from the pandemic. And so I hope people understand that at the root of we have inbuilt in us, we have this tremendous system called the glutathione immune response system that handles all these things. We've talked about inflammation, we've talked about detoxification, and then you have other questions about that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So the next question I have is, what is NOS glutathione?
So this is something that people don't talk about very much. And the reason we don't talk about it very much is the science on nitric oxide has been clear for a long time, but we haven't really known what to do about it. So much like glutathione, so exogenous forms of glutathione, we can put them in the body, but they're really not that, there's no science to tell us that they're effective. We make our own glutathione, our body does that. Actually, there's a significant surface tension barrier to exogenous glutathione. And so if we take glutathione from outside of our body and put it into our body, there's a 98.2% resistance, surface tension resistance to that glutathione. In other words, our body says, that's not mine, I don't really want it, so very little of it gets into the cell. So if we do it in a nanoparticle, or we do it in a liposome or something that, kind of can force it through the cell, it will get into the cell, but that doesn't mean it's any use inside of our cell. And so along with that, there's nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is another molecule that's essential to life. It's kind of the balance of how we balance our oxygen potential in our body. So we all know that we function on oxygen. People will go from, for instance, I noticed this year, because we've been at sea level here and we haven't traveled much out of this area for the last 3 years, except to go to Alberta. But I really noticed this time at Christmas time, when we left here, we're at sea level. There's a certain oxygenation of the air here. Our atmospheric pressure is pretty stable. We go to Alberta, we're 3,000 feet above sea level when we're in Alberta, and the air is different. The humidity is different. Everything's different about that. So I noticed that this year, because I made a note to see if I did notice the difference, but I didn't really have to make a note, because just going out and doing things, you find out that you have to breathe a little harder, a little faster. Well, why is that? Well, my body is used to a certain level of oxygen available in the atmosphere, and our body's like homeostasis, and so it had to fight to actually trigger this mechanism in our body whereby we can pick up oxygen. And there's two ways we do that. One is the balance between nitric oxide, which is another molecule. It's a gas that we make in our body, which is essential for immune function. It's also essential for fighting inflammation. We make it. We can't get it from outside. They use laughing gas or nitrogen. Actually, they'll use it as laughing gas, and of course, you can kill people with that, or you can just use it as an anesthetic. So there's this electrical potential in our body that we don't really talk about much, because in medicine, you go to the doctor, if the doctor says, you're kind of like a light bulb, you're a little dull, and we need to, we don't talk in those terms. Like, we talk in terms of symptoms and disease and labeling a disease and so on. But we don't talk much about the electrical potential of our body, even though it's very real. And without that difference in electrical potential in our body, we couldn't use oxygen. So we have to balance the amount of oxygen we bring in, because oxygen, we know that it can damage us as well. If you're a firefighter, one of the things you don't want to do is oxygenate a fire. Like, you don't want to give it extra oxygen, or it, just spreads the fire. It's kind of the same in our body. We have to manage the amount of oxygen. So there's this offset of oxygen using nitric oxide in our body. We make nitric oxide. It's a gas that only lasts about half a second. If we're not for glutathione, so there's something called glutathione, which is the ability of glutathione. Now, this molecule is so miraculous in our body. It has the ability to actually capture nitric oxide as a gas. It reduces it to a nitrate. Then when our body needs it, it actually can reoxygenate it into a gas. And so we have this amazing ability to balance throughout our body wherever we need nitric oxide. If we need it for the immune function, if we need it for cardiovascular function, if we need it for cognition, they're now looking at decrease in blood flow or decrease in oxygen and nitric oxide as one of the major causes of dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, general, lack of cognition function. And, it's kind of, people will say to you, well, I'm not very good at remembering people's names. Or as I've got older, I don't remember too much of, I don't remember things like I used to. And that's because there's decreased blood flow. And so one of the things we want to do is we want to enable whatever we have, we want it to be the best. And so this nitric oxide gas, glutathione has the amazing ability to pick up this gas, actually make it into a solid form or in a nitrate form on glutathione, and carry it around the body. So where nitric oxide itself has a half-life of less than a second, it can have a half-life of 14 to 16 hours in our body. So without glutathione, we would not have this tremendous potential to use oxygen like we do in our body. And go ahead.
That's very interesting. I find that so basically what you're saying is that this glutathione is really a great regulator for oxygen in our body, and so it from what I can gather, what you just said is that it regulates the oxygen in our body, and when we need it, it has the ability to put it back in the system when we need it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just to expand on that a little bit, I'm going to just mention this word. It's called angiogenesis. So angiogenesis is the constant fluctuation in the amount of cardiovascular system we have in our body. So there's a natural flow, if you want to put it that way, a natural sway in the amount of cardiovascular system we have in our body. So you think of somebody who's 100 pounds overweight, how much of our vascular system has to go to feed all of that mass, all those big fat cells? That all requires blood vessels. We lose that body mass, then we need a reduction in the amount of blood vessels. And it's really important that we reduce the amount of blood vessels that we have. Otherwise, they would be using up oxygen resources that our body doesn't need. So we have this natural fluctuation in our cardiovascular system. Now, generally speaking, one of the signs of aging is a reduction in circulation. My feet are getting cold, my hands get cold, so on and so forth. And we need to stimulate angiogenesis. We need to stimulate or re-stimulate the production of blood vessels throughout our body. And we can do that. Nitric oxide will help that. So this glutathione will help in angiogenesis. We can do that by eating different fruits. Pineapple, kiwi are very good at stimulating angiogenesis. Phytonutrients from dark chocolate or lonicera berry, like we have in products that contain lonicera berry, the Modexus products that are built on monoceroberry, the phytonutrients, they can also stimulate angiogenesis, or they can stimulate. So angiogenesis is both the stimulation of cardiovascular system as we need it, and also the reduction of cardiovascular system as needed. So if we're a person who's weight stable and we're just living our life and not exercising, one of the things that's going to happen is our body is going to preserve resources. And so it's going to literally draw back and create more blood flow in the essential organs that we're using, stomach, intestinal tract, etc. It's going to draw it from the external sources or external places. So that's, of course, our cerebral cavity. It's going to withdraw cardiovascular system from there. It's going to withdraw it from our extremities, so our toes or our hands, or so our extremities. And that's why when people, they get a little older and they go, well, I'm cold now. I don't know why I'm cold. It's because your cardiovascular system has responded to your inactivity by withdrawing the cardiovascular system out there. So one of the great things about this NOS glutathione, or nitric oxide itself, is the ability to restore that cardiovascular system to places like our brain, our extremities, so we can exercise. We can exercise with less effort and with less recovery time. So it is I know we haven't ever talked about this, Al, but it's a really extremely important aspect. I used to say to people, there's 5 aspects to glutathione, and we focus on 3. And all the literature and advertising you see about people bringing out a glutathione product, whether it's a swish in your mouth or a spray or this or that or whatever, they'll talk about inflammation, they'll talk about detoxification, they'll talk about the immune response, but they don't ever talk about this extremely important balancing of your oxygen potential at the cellular level, where we need to get oxygen into cells, we need to get it out, and we need nitric oxide to actually relax the cardiovascular system to allow that to happen. So imagine, here's our glutathione going through our system, relaxing the cardiovascular system as it goes along, allowing for the penetration of oxygen to all the areas of our body that it needs to go. So it's a really important function of both nitric oxide and glutathione. They're equally as important in that regard.
So next question, what is hemiglutathione?
So that's the 5th. We think about people that have low iron levels or their hemoglobin. They go and they have their blood test, their hemoglobin's low. And when we take iron, we make it into hemoglobin, we make it into a fat molecule, and that is actually the molecule that carries our oxygen around in the body. And so we want lots of red blood cells. They should be nice and red, and that indicates there's lots of hemoglobin, lots of stuff to capture oxygen. But how do we get oxygen to stick to iron? Because in nature, if you leave iron out, what's it going to do?
Rust,
right? So in our body, what keeps us from rusting in our body? There's actually 2 things that do that. First of all, you can't efficiently attach oxygen to the hemoglobin molecule without glutathione. That's one of the things that it does. And it does that by changing the electron potential of these 2 molecules, and it makes oxygen and hemoglobin come together, and they once they're stuck, they're really stuck. Then you need glutathione, where you're going to use the oxygen, you're going to need that to come apart, and that's part of the nitric oxide, that NOS, they work together with the hemoglobin. So it's a really important function. The other thing is B vitamins. So B vitamins, B1 or bentophamine, has a direct impact on the ability of our body to assimilate and use what's the hemi-iron, or the hemoglobin that's carrying oxygen, and keep it from rusting. So there's 2 things that we can do to enable our body to have better flow of blood, better oxygenation, and ultimately that's take bentophamine. You can buy bentophamine. It's very easily you can get it pretty much anywhere. Bentophamine, which helps your body not to rust. It keeps your hemoglobin in really good shape, and then optimizing your glutathione. The challenge that we all face is how do we optimize this nitric oxide? So we talked about inflammation, we've talked about detoxification, we've talked about an immune response, we've talked about NOS-glutathione, we've talked about hemi-glutathione. We've talked about these things, and the real challenge in all of these things is how do we get more nitrogen gas into our body without it killing us? How do we get more oxygen into our body without it killing us? And the regulatory facet of that boils down to glutathione again. So when I'm talking to people about health, the very first thing that I tell them, number one thing you need to do for health is you have to optimize your glutathione. And science tells us that the best way to optimize glutathione is, I call it fat. So I coined a term years ago, FFAAT, free form amino acid therapy. So we know that an individual amino acid called cysteine is the regulating molecule for glutathione in our body. So if we can stimulate, or if we can get more of that amino acid into our body, we can then either recycle the glutathione we have better, or, well, that's really what we do. We recycle that, or we stimulate the production and storage of glutathione by adding this amino acid into our blood. We can't overdo it because it's genetically controlled. We don't have a storage mechanism for amino acids, so it's not like I can take a whole bunch of amino acids and then forget it for the rest of my life, because we don't store them, we use them. If we don't use them, they're gone. That's why we need to eat protein every day. We didn't need to if we stored amino acids. Too bad amino acids weren't like fat. You know, I mean, we get fat when we want to get rid of it, and we don't want it, but amino acids, which are essential for life and are building blocks, we don't store them. Kind of an interesting proposition. But so free form amino acid therapy has been clinically proven over time as the optimal way to get your glutathione. And when we optimize glutathione, we can fight inflammation, we can exercise more, we can be more mobile, we can be more cognate, we can get more oxygen, we can do all these functions better. We can take bentophamine to keep our body from rusting. That's an easy thing to do. So these are really easy things that we can do now, and the science is behind us, where there's a lot of glutathione products on the market that are exogenous glutathione. And I maybe mentioned this before, but there's a great resistance at our cell level to exogenous glutathione. It's not very well accepted by our cells. And so why would nature do that? Why would it do that? Because it wants to make our own. It wants to be in control of that production. And it has so many important functions in our body, like the regulation of oxygen, working with nitric oxide, working with our hemoglobin, that no one knows what happens when you load up the body with just straight glutathione. Like, you can get it in through your cells. Nobody knows what that's actually doing long-term to your body. There's no science on that yet. Where we have tons of science. We have almost 50 years now of free-form amino acid therapy science on optimizing glutathione using amino acids. We use fat, free-form amino acid therapy. We use it in other modalities. For instance, if somebody has cancer, now they talk about using immunotherapy. Immunotherapy means we take a protein out of your body, and we'll attach chemotherapy to that protein and put it back in your body. And then hopefully that chemo will just go to where that amino acid is most used. And we can maybe target that chemo and reduce the side effects of the chemotherapy. So there's a lot of science going on in immunotherapy. And I think there's going to be an emerging science called free-form amino acid therapy, where we understand that these amino acids, while yes, they make up our muscle and they work together, but amino acids themselves have individual functions in the body. And if we can isolate those functions and what surrounds that with science, then we can use these amino acids in a much more efficient way. What we do know, we've got 50 years of science on glutathione. We've got 25 years of science on nitric oxide. We have literally hundreds of years of science on hemoglobin. There's no question about hemoglobin and what it does and how you can optimize it. So, I think we're at a really fascinating point in our health evolution, if you want to put it that way. We can look really deep into things. We can study really deep into things because we have technology to do that now, or we didn't have before. And I think our prospects for treating disease and our prospects for longevity are much higher than we hear people talk about. We hear, I heard recently that the life expectancy has gone down after the pandemic. From men, it had gone up to 81 years, and for women, it was 83.4 years. And now it's back into the 70s, high 70s for both. I don't think we need to buy into that. I think, optimizing our glutathione, number one, making sure we can get some bentophamine into our body to help with our blood. And then, there is going to be ways. I'm looking at a way to simulate and get nitric oxide for people so they can get nitric oxide into their body. I think that's really critically essential as well. So I think we're at a really great sort of scientific point in understanding really on a level we've never seen before, how the body integrates and works together as a system. There's 5 different systems, and this is maybe a topic for another video. There's 5 different systems that have to integrate in our body for it to work. So, but now we're understanding on a microscopic level how these all integrate. Anyway, I think I've answered your question, so at least I hope I have.
Yes, you have. So it was interesting because I was not aware of NOS glutathione or hemiglutathione. I'd heard of the other 3 functions that glutathione performs. So this is very informative. So any recommendations for a product to at least get your get your glutathiones at a higher level?
Well, right now, I've used several products over the years. We started off with N-acetylcysteine. I think a lot of people are aware of N-acetylcysteine. It's called NAC. NAC is a drug. It's not a natural product for people that are using it. NAC is a method of getting that amino acid, that cysteine, into our body. So we make it into a drug. That's N-acetylcysteine is a drug. We take salicylic acid, we make it into acetylsalicylic acid to make aspirin, which then it helps your fever, where we can't use salicylic acid in our body. Really, it's damaging to us. But if we acylate it, we can use it. So we can acylate the amino acid. The challenge with that, it's mostly used up in the liver, it doesn't really get out to the extremities. And to use it long term, our body gets very used to, like it does with all drugs, it gets used to it and it metabolizes it very quickly. So it loses its potency over time. So then I've used special protein supplements. They're still good. I don't have any objection to them, but people have lots of objection to using protein substrates because they don't taste good, they don't mix easily. Kids hate them. So right now I'm using a capsule. It's called Lonacera Longevity. The Lonacera, the phytonutrients come here. They're from Canada. Actually, the Lonacera Berry Farms supply that from British Columbia, and it's a great phytonutrient. It's actually 17 times more phytonutrients than blueberries, and blueberries are kind of the industry standard or nutritional standard for phytonutrients. Lonacera berry is 17 times stronger than blueberries. So, and it's got the amino acids in the capsule. It's got something called cellulose. Cellulose actually is something to help your liver recycle glutathione. So when we use our glutathione and its potential is reduced to 0, it goes to the liver where it's either excreted, or if we have the capability in our liver, we can recycle that glutathione, put it back into our blood. And that's the preferred method. We don't want to lose our glutathione because, once again, we got what we got. We don't want to lose it. It's one of the problems with recuperating addicts, for instance. Why is it so difficult for them to recuperate? And one of the challenges is they maybe have lost a certain percentage of their immune function. And we don't know how to replace that. Actually, we do. I shouldn't say that. UBC has discovered a way to transplant immune systems. It's very complicated, and it's not widely accepted at this time. But in the future, I think we'll be able to help people that have severe addictions or severe illnesses like anorexia, we can transplant immune functions into these people, and that will make a huge difference in their recovery. So there is a lot of future in that. So yeah, we're moving along at a great rate. I like this. It's a capsule. You can take it apart and put it in a drink if you want. You can just use it as a capsule, 2 capsules a day. We do know scientifically the level of amino acid required to trigger these responses. It has to be over 200 milligrams. Anything less than that has no immunological response. It's well established in the scientific literature. We have significantly more than 200 milligrams of the required amino acid in the Lonicera longevity. So we know that it does work. The science is behind us on that. And it's really easy and convenient for people to take. And once again, if they can't take a capsule, and there's people who can't take a capsule, they can take it apart and mix it in something else and take it into their body. So that's what I'm currently using. It's Lonicera longevity, great product. Purple, looks really nice. And it's actually not too bad taste-wise either if you have to take it as outside the capsule.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. I look forward to when you find out some more information about this nitric oxide and how we can get that into our system, because to me that's the next frontier in our health, as far as I can see. Is the research says it. It's just a matter, just like glutathione, they had the research there, but we took almost a century before they could figure out how we could actually get it into our system. And same with nitric oxide, it's been researched, and it's very, very important. The question is how do we assimilate that into our body, and how do so that it can function. Anyways, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to talking to you at a later time.
Very good. Thank you for the time. Okay, good night.
You're welcome.